Welcome to this bonus episode of the Third Sector podcast. I'm Lucinda Rouse, and with me is Andy Ricketts.
Hello, Lucinda.
We're going to spend a few minutes on the topic of a new chair of the Charity Commission. We're recording this a day after the news broke that Dame Julia Unwin was announced as the preferred candidate for the next Charity Commission chair. She's taking over from the interim chair, Mark Sims, who was appointed at the end of April after Orlando Fraser stepped down following one term in post. Andy, what do we know about Julia Unwin?
Dame Julia Unwin, as she is a well-known figure in the voluntary sector. Probably her most famous role, if you like, was that she spent nearly 10 years as chief executive of the Joseph Rowntree Foundation from 2007 to 2016. And she also then went on to chair the Civil Society Futures Inquiry, which was a 2-year investigation about the future of civil society. So it was a real in-depth kind of examination of what civil society might look like in the future and how it might prepare for that. So she's steeped in voluntary sector knowledge. She was a charity commissioner back in the 90s, so has been in and around the sector for a very long time. She had a board member role of the former social housing regulator, the Housing Corporation, for 9 years. She's also worked as a consultant, an advisor, a mentor and a speaker in the voluntary and the broader public sector. So she's got loads of experience in the voluntary sector.
And looking back at the history of this chair role at the Charity Commission, that's actually quite unusual, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it's been nearly 20 years since we've had somebody in that position who comes with such a strong voluntary sector background.
Minus the current interim incumbent.
Yeah, Mark Sims, who is chief executive of P3. He is a Charity Commission board member, but he's only been the interim chair. But yeah, not since Geraldine Peacock in 2006, who was the first chair of the Charity Commission in the form that we currently see. Since then, we've had a succession of public servants and lawyers, really, who have been in that role. So I think there's quite a lot of excitement in the voluntary sector to see somebody who actually has led a charity for a significant period of time being appointed to this position.
Yeah, when you take a step back and think about it, it's actually quite bizarre that they haven't had many charity sector bods in the chair role. What's the recruitment process for this?
Well, it's a government appointment. So the Charity Commission doesn't itself appoint who the chair is because it's a non-departmental public body. The government is responsible for making the appointment of this post. So the Department for Culture, Media and Sport leads the recruitment process. It's publicly advertised and anyone can apply, and then they will come up with a shortlist and interview various people and then decide on their preferred candidate. The next step now is for Julia Unwin to be interviewed by MPs on the DCMS Select Committee on the 25th of November. They will then take a couple of days to produce a report, maybe quicker than that, whether they think that this person is suitable or not. And then the government will then decide on whether they will go ahead and appoint her. It would be astounding at this point if she didn't get the job, because actually the previous 2 chairs of the Charity Commission, Orlando Fraser and before that Tina Stoll, were both rejected highly unusually by the DCMS Select Committee as the preferred candidate, but the government went ahead and appointed them anyway. And, given Julia Unwin's credentials, it would be amazing if she didn't end up getting the job, because I'd be amazed if the committee didn't approve her anyway.
So if there was ever a job interview that you were going to flunk, that would be quite a good one, seeing as it doesn't necessarily affect the outcome. I wonder why they do it at all.
No, well, I mean, I suppose it's a bit of a staged piece, really, and it's the chance for MPs to get a bit of an understanding of what motivates this person and what their credentials are for the role.
So it's a part-time role, 2.5 days a week. What does the Charity Commission chair actually do?
Well, essentially, they're the person who's setting the tone for the rest of the Charity Commission board. They are leading the organisation and helping to set the strategy for the overall organisation. I mean, it's very similar to a chair of a regular charity in that sense. But it is, it's a big commitment. It's 2.5 days a week. It's, I think, considerably more than a normal charity post, which is mostly volunteered. I mean, obviously, this is a salaried position. Julia Unwin will be paid £62,500 a year for 2.5 days a week on average, the same as Orlando Fraser was. So there's been no inflation in that in the meantime. But that shows the significant commitment that it is. It's not just something that you can spend an hour an evening doing. They are obviously highly influential in terms of the way that the Commission conducts itself in terms of its regulatory oversight of the voluntary sector.
And you've been speaking to people in the sector about her appointment over the past 24 hours or so. There will be a reactions piece on the website. What are people saying about her appointment?
Well, perhaps unsurprisingly, there's general excitement. And in fact, I can't find anybody who says something negative about this. Not that I'm looking for that, but in terms of balance, usually you would have some people who would be negative about it. In this case, it seems to be general excitement that, actually we've got, as we said before, for the first time in nearly 20 years, a recognised sector person who is going to be taking this figurehead role. I mean, we've had positive reactions from the NCVO, from the Director of Social Change. Jane Ide, who leads Akivo, has said that it's a very welcome appointment. Andrew Purkis, who was a former Charity Commission board member and has known Julia Unwin professionally since the 1980s, says that she is very good at being independent and not falling foul of groupthink, which is a risk in a role like that you're kind of influenced too much. The Commission is meant to be independent from government and act as an independent regulator. So it's important that she will be independent in the role that she performs as chair of the Charity Commission. And he says that she's very strong on that.
Do you think there could be political pressure placed on her?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be pressure placed politically on whoever's in this post. I mean, they are supposed to be independent, and the Commission is an independent regulator, and the person in this job is supposed to act in a way that shows integrity and adheres to the the sort of Nolan principles around the duties of that role. But there's always going to be pressure placed from all sides, not just the government of the day, but also opponents. The Commission has been quite outspoken recently in terms of saying that it won't be used as a political pawn in a game where you get political opponents of certain organisations making complaints that are really just to throw mud at them, but it doesn't really go anywhere, and they just might get a bit of anti-traction against that organisation. We've seen that really quite a bit in the Israeli-Palestine conflict, where there's been complaints on both sides about each other, just in a way to try to throw a bit of mud in their direction. So there's always pressure there, but she seems well placed to resist it. She's
going to be the Charity Commission Chief Executive David Holdsworth's boss, isn't she?
Yes.
I actually spoke to David Holdsworth earlier this year for our documentary When Charity Goes Wrong, and I asked him about how the independence of the Commission can be assured when the chair of the Charity Commission is a political appointee. And I'm just going to play you his response now.
So chairs are political appointees, yes, but actually when the chairs come into the organisation, they are all subject to the Nolan principles and duties of public life. And certainly the chairs that I've worked with in the Commission have adhered to the Nolan principles in public life. And often, perception can be that perhaps there is a political flavour or a political colour, in which case it's our job as civil servants to both ensure the framework is safe, but also help engage with the sector to ensure that any perception that isn't reality is debunked.
There we have it from the horse's mouth.
Yeah. I mean, obviously he has to be very careful what he might say about his boss, but he's right. It is a political appointment made by the government of the day, but there is a duty for them to act with integrity and adhere to those principles of independence.
Absolutely. So, gazing into the future, do you think there are going to be any changes as a result of Julia Unwin's appointment?
So in the short term, I don't think anything dramatic is going to change. The Commission's legal duties will remain the same. The way they register charities will be the same. There's not going to be any changes there. I think in the long term, we'll probably see just a difference in tone in terms of how they approach the sector, because obviously the Commission chair very much sets the standard of how the Commission interacts with the voluntary sector. And I think this will herald maybe a slightly softer and more understanding tone from the Charity Commission in the way that it engages with charities.
Well, we watch this space. And in terms of timeline, as you said earlier, 25th of November is her session before the Select Committee for Culture, Media and Sport. And Mark Sims, the interim chair, will remain in post until the 24th of January. Thanks very much for listening to this mini episode. You can find more of our coverage about Julia Unwin's appointment and a reactions piece on the Third Sector website. Our producer is Jude Owen.